I find when working with younger kids, for example, playing a tabletop, 9 years old, maybe slightly younger, you got to give them breaks to embody the game. You know, you may sit at the table story time, then you got to say, okay, guys, go act it out, and they run off and they embody it for a bit, and then they come back to the table. So were you guys able to, as I didn't during the lockdown and the last little 6 months or so, I haven't done any work with younger kids except personally, but I want to know if you guys found a need for, how did you work with that necessity of the younger kids to get up and run around while you were working with them from a distance or online work? Did any of you?
Sometimes I had to roll with the punches on that. My youngest right now, I believe, is 7. So that was the youngest. I was like, prior to that in the office, we were seeing as young as 4. So my age range that I'm working with is pretty broad. But on the youngest level, it was, okay, it took a while to find out what games were actually going to work with him online while we were playing. And then after that, it was, okay, you need a break. Why don't you run and go get something from your room, like, that you want to show me, you know? And like, just that, okay, it's dance time. Just dance for a bit, you know? Like, just let it all out, dance, get it out your system. This is, you know, this is what you need. Like, I had gotten to a point where I was able to kind of judge about when you need that break, and also like adjust the time of the sessions to that. So a lot of our clients were getting 2 to 4 hours a week, and then it's like, okay, well, we're gonna have to spread that out with individual and group. As far as back to what we were saying before regarding like tech use, when everything started going, so me, Jack, and Tim were going to meet in Maryland for BFG-Con, right? And so while we were on our way down there, Maryland started to go into lockdown.
Yeah.
So the con got canceled, and so we were on our way down there, and as all of this was going down, me and Tim was like, look, we gotta, by the time we get back to Jersey, we gotta be up, rolling, and ready for when it hits New Jersey, because it's gonna happen. And so in that time, we switched over to TheraNest. We started just getting games for Roll20 ready. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were ready for was, we have in-home clients, we have in-community clients. What's that going to look like when, during COVID? And it took about a good month for the state to decide what they wanted to do. And the practitioners weren't waiting on that. They were like, well, we're just not going to go into the home because we're not going to take the risk. And, we got that. We understood that. So it was, we have to find a system that we know is going to be HIPAA compliant, because right now HIPAA laws are lax. So if things change, it's changing swiftly in one direction, it could easily change directions back the other way. I want to be ready. So I wound up making sure my TeleMental Health was updated, my certification for that. Dr. James, who also works in our office, was already board certified for that. So we wanted to make sure that we had all of that ready, and then have our hardware ready. And it was like laptops and PCs that we know could handle what we're trying to do. So I made it so that my PC was going to be able to have one screen where I'm looking at the client, one screen that's the game, and the other screen that might be something else. In the case of using Roll20, it'd be like, here's my character sheet, here's the actual game, here's TheraNest. But also it was, I have a large library of games on my computer, and I was just like, put it all together. So my Android apps, my Steam games, Epic, my Microsoft Game Pass on the PC. So I think before we were up and rolling, I probably had at least 30 board games or games that could be considered cooperative, turn-taking. I wanted to make sure that there was games available that involved taking turns, involved being cooperative, and also I wanted to make sure that there was a lot of high visual processing games, like, for example, Othello. You know, something simple like that, but something that it involves that use. And games that I hadn't used in the office, I found to be a lot more accessible on my computer. Takedo, Risk, and I would say Galaxy Trucker were way more accessible. And we started using games that way. So I would share the screen on my end so the client could see it, and then we'd play. Now, when you want to talk about turn taking and you can't touch the piece yourself, that was frustrating. And so, like, learning
but so liberating that you know, now there's so less of a chance for somebody, stop touching my piece.
Knock over the whole,
move, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
no, you can't table flip virtually. It's virtually, it's impossible.
No, they just disconnect is what happens.
Oh, yeah, no, that's true.
Oh, I got a ton of that.
So that reminds me of my first COVID online game. So I'd been working with some 8-year-olds, and we were meeting in an office, and it was already hard enough to keep them all, focused and engaged. We're playing Kids on Bikes, and then we have our first meeting online. And it was after things had been shut down for a couple of weeks. You know, they've just been home isolated. And our first session really was, one of the kids is like, "This is my nose. This is my nose." And so after about 10 minutes of trying to, we're going to play Kids on Bikes because, hey, somebody asked earlier, what is the best game? Or, what's the best game to play and why is it Kids on Bikes? But anyway, so what I finally did after about 10 minutes is, like Shawn was saying earlier, the game is cool. It's a something of shared attention that we can, it's our excuse to engage and relate and communicate. So what I did after about 10 minutes is I'm like, hey guys, you want to just have a dance party? And I just turned on some music on my computer, and we're all like, and we did that, and they loved it. They'd been isolated, separated. They were on their own for 2 weeks, and just being with somebody, these kids who already have issues with, attention regulation, emotional regulation, sensory regulation, having this opportunity to connect, share, and have fun. Affect is another one of our tools that we can still use online. And we can just make it bigger, and bigger doesn't have to be louder or faster, but by being more dramatic. And this works in person too. Affect is the glue that holds everything together. And affect also dual encodes everything in our brain. Our brains record everything as sensory experiences, and then if we add that emotion to it, it's another way, like the multisensory stuff, to give us multiple paths to that knowledge, to that experience, using that affect. And if you think, like, what did you have for lunch on June 13th? I don't know, but if June 13th was an important day, maybe it was the day you got married. I bet you remember then. You have that big emotion that can be positive or negative. Inside Out, you guys remember that Pixar movie? Awesome. It's not just about happiness. We had a kid do that happy and sad memory merge thing the other day. It was like, I can't do this. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And then at the end of the week, it was, hey, this was really cool, but it was also really hard. And it's like, oh, beautiful. And
pulling those heartstrings.
Affect is what makes all that stuff happen. Yeah, bigger definitely does not mean
my one of my favorite
I love you.
situations that comes up is being online. Kids are in their house. They could pretty much do whatever they want, which does include disconnect whenever they want. Yeah. But when they don't want to have their camera on, and you got to be okay with that. That, hey, look, you know what? That's fine. I have my glasses on, for because of the screens. Look, I already know that there's some social cues we're not going to get. But then when the camera comes back on and they're wearing like a giant Fortnite like teddy bear, I look forward to that every week.
Now, in one of our kids on bikes, it's a running joke now that since COVID and quarantine, one of our kids apparently don't like shirts, and that's become plainly apparent because every session we're like, do you think maybe, buddy, we could put a shirt on today while we're doing group? And he's augmented, and he's like, he wears blankets around himself now, but everyone's like, my shirt bothers my skin, and my mom doesn't get me the right shirt. So I'm like, part of me is like, sensory issue could be, or it could be, hey, I'm at home, man. If you want me to show up, I guess I'm showing up like in my version of a toga, which is a noga. So, unless you don't want me to show up for group, I guess I'm at the beach. And we're like, okay, there we go. And the other players, like we've said, seriously, is anyone else uncomfortable with, this cat being without coverage for his northern hemisphere? And everyone seemed like okay. And it was a good kind of funny moment. So now every week they're like, did your mom buy you any shirts you can wear yet? Like, it's turned into a thing, and he giggles and laughs about it. So, we've even talking about some of those weird things that happen, you know what I mean? They create memorable moments, which help gel the group together, because those are funny memories that you have. We're nothing but a collection of our memory. That's what we have.
For this session, we'll be shutting off our cameras and our mics today.
You guys are reminding me of a phenomena I noticed.
Sorry.
I wear no pants.
Oh my God, I'm having flashbacks to the interruptions to talking. Did you guys notice that regularity became a vital thing, and how I got feedback that the regular meetings with my kids was as important as just whatever we were doing? There's just that regularity, maintaining the regularity through the lockdown in the uncertain times during those many months became extremely important for my kids. Even though my teens were slowly becoming vampires, I had to keep changing the meeting time to later and later in the day. And then I had an attrition rate as summer approached, but definitely during late winter and early spring, it was a vital thing for them, that regularity, maintain the regularity. Did you guys experience that?
Oh, we actually, as part of our process, we built this in almost intuitively without even needing a response. We were kind of like, hey gang, we know there's a lot going on. So what we're going to do is, because we don't have to spend, the half an hour, 45 minutes driving to group that we used to have to do, why don't we just open the room a half an hour early, and let's just talk about how everyone's dealing with being on quarantine and missing school. And the kids now are like, yo, if you don't run, if I don't get my time, we're going to have a problem, because they need that. And it's literally, that's become a staple of all of our groups, where we're signing in a half an hour early just to kibitz. We're just talking about whatevs. And it's been phenomenal, because again, it's another aspect of what's going on. You're missing that connection. You're missing that ability. So I have this group, I have this connection. I'm not only not going to lose it, but I'm going to milk it for all the vitamins I can get out of it. You know what I mean?
I think for me, I found that it was hard for a chunk of my clients to go from being together in a group to now being separated, some of them having to do individual just because of the way things played out for them. So they would go from group online to now individual online, and then slowly back to group in person. And then trying to maintain a regular schedule, trying to maintain, okay, this is the time you have set to do this activity. Because we were also competing with schools online, like, oh, well, we had one kid that we were seeing like maybe at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock every morning, because that's when their break was from school. And for some of our other kids, they were just zoomed out. They were done. By the time they didn't want to see me anymore. as soon as like in person became an option.
And, it's funny too, because you say that because kids nowadays are always on the tablet or the computer or video game, and now they're at school, at therapy, and playing all online, and it's almost too much now.
Yeah. Are you old enough to say, the kids today on their tablets on the screen? Are you old enough to make that phrase? I don't know.
Get out of my lawn!
I feel like I'm getting there. I may look as younger than I am.
But keeping that consistency was very important, I believe, because in some of the cases that I had, we were the only consistent thing they had now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was tough to see some kids who desperately needed the service they just wasn't going to be able to do it online, and so that's where we saw a lot of disconnect.
Have any of you? I mean, just as a weird question, because this has come up in a couple of our group discussions. Have any of you seen like someone who's like, yeah, it's great we get to meet online, but when are we getting back together again? Like, have you had to have that discussion?
All the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a ton of it. And and the thing is too, it's the way we did our service is we probably could have made the argument that this is a needed service, especially and to continue it in the office. We could have made that argument. Instead, what we did was we have modeled when we open and close based on when daycares have to start shutting down. Because then it's like, what is the fewest amount of people that can be allowed in the room? All right, if we exceed that, then no. And then especially if we had situations where I knew there was no way this child was going to be able to keep a mask on. And so there's some clients that we have not seen again in person yet, either due to fear on the family's end, or I feel responsible for this child being here, and I know they cannot take care of their hygiene in such a way where they're going to be safe and stable in this environment.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to touch on the masks. If you are starting to see clients in an office, if you're a therapist or a counselor or whatnot, and if they are having trouble wearing the mask, ask them to try to pick up a face shield. Maybe that'll help. It's just something that isn't constantly in your face. And then we found with some of our clients that was more helpful for our clients to be able to wear it consistently through the whole session. We have a good question on here for summer schools. How Kay she's about to start school again. They're planning on doing a camp and virtual sessions with their teens with ASD from camp, and they want to know ways they could submit concerns anonymously, either before or during the event to be discussed. One of the things you could do is just create a consent form, and on that consent form, put if there's any sensory issues, and if there's things that you don't want to have, or any concerns that you may have. So this way they can be brought up from you when the session starts. So it's not coming from anyone directly and no one's being put on the spot.
Yeah. And
talk about the X card and lines and veils and stuff.
Yeah.
Sure. So in the world of therapeutic RPG and even therapeutic board gaming, depending on the theme, there's three commonly referenced consent tools or consent mechanics that we use. So there's the X card, lines and veils, and what they call the remote control or VCR.
Yeah.
So X card, very simply, and this is actually found in the purchasable on the rack version of For the Queen.
Yeah.
It's a card with a big old X on it. And the use of that card is that if during play there is content that is emotionally uncomfortable or objectionable or in any way that the player does not want to have in in their session, they tap the card. And that is a signal for the facilitator, the GM, the group to stop what you're doing. The player is not required under any way, shape, or form to have to express or explain why it happened or why they don't want that content. But that is an opportunity to take the story in a different direction. It's the opportunity to retcon whatever it is that you've been doing. And it's a great in the moment mechanic. Now, what we do with Bodhana and what I actually recommend is kind of using an amalgam of all of these tools, because the second one is called lines and veils. So lines and veils, it basically uses the idea that a line is, this is a topic we have drawn a line through. So for example, if it is animal cruelty, man, in the world you're running, that don't even exist as a thing. There is no animal cruelty in this universe. Maybe Dr. Strange cast a spell and banished all the animal cruelty. Who knows? It just isn't there. Why? Because it would make a player feel uncomfortable. And as a group, you have that social contract. And you establish all of this from session 0 when you start to format that game, and you remind folks of it here and there. Now, veils operate a little differently. It's kind of like, okay, animal cruelty may exist in this world, so I may mention, a crook getting busted for, an animal cruelty fighting ring, or, something bad happened to someone's dog, but you don't describe it in detail. It's a veil. We only see the shadow behind what's going on. And that's something that what we do is we actually ask lines and veils based questions before our session on our intake forms. We have one that is a direct ask intake where we talk about elements like that. We also have a form that the person fills out on their own, which is more of like an anecdotal form. So this way, if it's like, hi, I'm Jack, you met me 10 minutes ago, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets, they might not be comfortable at that point. So we can use that form so someone then has a way to not have to express it verbally later. Then we build all that in, and we don't have to say who said what, but we say, okay, guys, here's what's not okay at our table. Here's the list, and you can even post that like in an online forum to know this is the we don't go there line. Remote control is a bit more of an upgrade from the X card, where, as you know, a VCR, if you are old enough to remember one, yes, that's actually a thing Jack has to say. You have a play button, which is we're all cool. There's a rewind going, hey, can we go back for a minute? There's a fast forward, which is like, Dark Helmet and Spaceballs. No, go past this part. In fact, never play this part again. We're zooming past. There's a pause, which might be, hey, can we talk about this for a minute? Can I share a story, Tim, about how this might work out? I don't want to take our time too much.
I think it would be good for anyone that isn't familiar with lines and veils to understand by a story. So go ahead. Okay.
So in our Kids on Bikes adventure it's a grant funded group that we're running through an agency. We actually, one of the characters, we were going through an adventure and we were like, okay, so your character is going to go home. And the player's like, well, my character doesn't really want to go home. And I was like, okay, well, why not? Well, Ben, which is the character's name, Ben hates his big brother or his big sister. Why does Ben hate his big sister? And even I, now again, I have 20 years of experience working with disclosure and things of this nature. So I, as a facilitator, was by no means shocked when the player said, trigger warning, oh, his sister molests him. And the table went, and everybody, like drinks stopped, and like you could hear that Hollywood like record scratch. And I said, okay, guys, remember a few weeks ago when we started group, we mentioned the X card. This might be a good time to review that because obviously something uncomfortable came up. So, that first time it was helpful to take them through the process. And we said, so what, so-and-so just said might make you feel uncomfortable. And it's okay to feel that way. What we need to talk about as a group is that okay at the table, and how okay or not okay is everybody with it? You don't have to say why. And we actually had, for a young group, we had a very great conversation where they were like, well, if it's what, that person wanted for their character, I guess it's their character, so it's kind of okay. But like, we don't have to hear like any details or like any of the gross stuff about it. And they're like, absolutely not. And we turned to the player and said, are you okay with the group's feelings? And I go, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Like, so it turned into this wonderful openness sharing moment. And again, we don't know per se if that player has a legitimate concern or issue along those lines. That's something we're following up on, but that content can present itself for whatever reason. And again, people inject what they want or what they need out of this game kind of independently, you'll find. But that's a great example of how there is something to be said for, yes, there is uncomfortable themes that might come up. So knowing these consent mechanics, and again, it doesn't even have to necessarily be emotional content. It could be maybe another player's being too loud. Maybe another character has their mic too close to their mic and they're chewing a sandwich. And it's that background noise that one player's like, dude, you keep doing that, I'm going to reach out and touch someone. You know what I mean? It's just not going to be happy. So those are ways for people to be able to communicate what's going on, and it really adds a lot to that group experience. And I think they're especially important in the midst of the online era. And Xcard, very simply, I could send a private message to any one of you right now who's in this chat with just a big old capital X, and that's all the player needs to do, which is a tremendous amount of like personal power and agency, especially depending on what the content is. So did I answer that okay with that and everything?
I think so.
Yeah.
Shawn,
One thing I would add to that real quick is we have worked with very violent clients over the last couple of years, and so history of violence, low verbal, low cognitive, older. And one thing I would say when it comes to safety to keep in mind, we have had the benefit of working with someone individually first in the home before having them here in the office. And so I now have years of knowledge regarding like this kid's triggers. What are the words that they start repeating before they become violent? What are the like, and so sometimes knowing somebody, if you can, and I've seen where it's been more beneficial for us at times, if having some individual knowledge prior to group with the person, if you can have that benefit and that advantage, it's very helpful. Being aware that triggers may not necessarily just be like you said, it may not just be like something that's emotional. It may not be just something that said. It can be, like we mentioned earlier, the lights are too bright.
Yeah. Could be the hum of the air conditioner. It could be anything.
That air
Absolutely.
conditioner. I'm so glad we're not there anymore.
Shawn, is there anything we've missed on like the LARPing end of safety mechanics that haven't been said?
Well, we haven't talked about debriefing, so I don't know if you guys want to talk about after the game.
Yeah.
How everyone sort of comes out of the magic circle and how we exit the container and how we talk about how we try not to focus on war stories at first, but we allow them at some point, and then we sort of focus on processing. Let's hear what you guys have about that, because that's always a very interesting thing.
So I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan, and Matt, the director at Airy Experiences that I work with, the Adventure Camp, that's a big thing for him too, the hero's journey. And so, Shawn, like you just mentioned, the magic circle. One of the things that can help delineate we're in the real world and now we're in this imaginary, safe, magical, separate world. And again, this goes to things that help community, help build this connection with other people, and also to help you feel strong, powerful, like you have some control, some autonomy, different rituals. When my adult groups get together, we start off just kind of hanging out, a little talk, as people are gathering or logging online or whatever. And then at some point, we'll kind of start to round that down and say, okay, so we're going to have a check-in for this week. And it's like, this is a ritual. This is something that we always do, and this indicates like a transition into this, from the real world, now we're going into this imaginary place. And then when we get done with that, too, we'll do something like Two Roses and a Thorn, or, okay, I'm drawing a blank. So we'll go Two Roses and a Thorn. So basically it's, what's two things from today that were positive? What's one that's negative? Or spotlight? You know, do you want to shine a spotlight on somebody else in the group tonight? So having those kind of rituals to mark, we're coming in, we're coming out. The rituals help. It's, you know, something that, you know, it's a part of being this group. If anybody watched or used to listen to or watch Critical Role, that, you know, how do you want to do that? That's, you know, when you kill the big bad, they have a phrase or something that's common to the group. So having those traditions, symbols, tokens, rituals, whatever, can help with, like Shawn is saying, that really sets aside, this is a separate, safe, imaginary time. This isn't real, but we're all in this together. This is our special thing where, you know, we're all heroes. We're all the good guys, hopefully.
Yeah.
Then there's murder hobos, but you can be good murder hobos. It's just kind of.
Well, it's all about the structure of the session. I mean, we usually run our sessions at Bodhana in 2-hour increments. We always start with a 15-minute how's your father, like, you know, how's everything going? How's everybody's week been? Anything new to share with the group? So we kind of like, okay, we have the real world. Now let's put it in this little bag and let's kind of put it over here for a second. And then it's okay. So what happened last adventure? And we also have like a weird rule with some of our groups that we started to enhance role playing of, you know, everything you say right now is kind of in character, and if you want to speak out of character, we kind of do like a little silly like moose thing in the front, so we know that like you're speaking out of character. So we want to kind of keep immersion. But when you do like a rules check, that's a break to immersion. At the end, we always leave time for bookkeeping, and our catchphrase, I mean, talking about ritual, is always it. And again, we borrowed it from the captain, where and that's where we're going to leave off for now, you know, and that's something we'll discover next week. And, you know, then we do bookkeeping, which is like an EXP. We check for adversity tokens, you know, all that stuff that's like bookkeeping. So now we've taken the fantasy immersion, and it's almost kind of like a step down process to exit. So we've been in the game and in the zone. Now it's about your character, and it's more like you're an accountant, you know, looking over accounts receivable. Then we step to this. So has anybody got anything cool coming up this week? Like what's going on? Everybody doing anything for the holidays, or, you know, anything fun? Going to see a movie this week or whatever. And then we kind of use that as our way to outro. And that's pretty much been a standard since we started.
Yeah, my biggest thing that I'm doing now is we do what was the last thing you remember, just like we normally would do in like any role-playing game that I usually run. But then I'll ask a question about the players themselves. Then I'll ask a question about their characters that they're playing. And that usually leads us into playing the game. And then when we're coming out of the question, I'll ask an exit question that is reflecting what they think maybe something they could have done differently, or their or advice they could have gave their character to change something they would have done in the game.
So, you know, as a therapist going in looking at it, I through Autplay, it's like there's 6 major goals, and like whether or not the people in the group know that they're on spectrum or not. Like if that's going to come up, I'd let them bring that up organically if it comes up. But in my head, I'm keeping several different goals in mind: emotional regulation, social functioning, relationship connections, anxiety reduction, sensory processing, and behavioral change. So I in my head, I know that in the group, these goals are lined up somewhere because they're in the same group. We usually try to do our groups by cognitive level and goals, if possible, and then play style, like level of play, if possible. So then if I have people who prefer parallel play, then the games and the interactions are set with that in mind. If I have people that are capable of peer and cooperative play, then the games and interactions are set with that in mind. But then as we go through check-in and check-out, I've been trying to focus more on like the powers of play, which would be there's over 20 of them, but the general idea is communication, social functioning, relationships and attachments, and personal strengths. So then when Tim is asking questions, I will try to develop series of questions that hit the skills and benefits I'm looking to introduce or build on. And then that becomes part of like the check-in and check-out.
I think there was a really interesting question that came through about, we were talking about the process. What are some of the outcomes that we've seen? I think that's a great question to try to touch on before we're done.
Yeah.
So I don't know who wants to take that one first.
I just typed my response in the chat, so I'll go over that too. So from a DIR floor time perspective, it's a developmental approach, relationship-based approach. It's strengths-based, so we're talking about assets and affinities. So what I'm looking for aren't necessarily specific skills. The floor time approach looks at learning like a tree, and the roots are individual sensory differences, how we experience the world. So we want to make sure that we're in a place where we feel safe, we feel connected. Otherwise, anything you build on top of that is going to be fragile and iffy. It's like, oh, this rose bush that I planted in this gravel, the rose isn't very healthy. Yeah, you can't focus on the flower until you get it planted in some good soil. So starting with the feeling safe and connected, and then the trunk of the tree are what we call functional, emotional, developmental capacities. Basically, it's things like I put in the chat box. What we're looking at first is sensory and emotional regulation. Can you be calm and feel safe? 2, engagement. So the next thing is, can you be connected with somebody else? 3 is reciprocity. You want to have some back and forth going. And this, by the way, is how I figure out what kind of game I want to use with somebody. If there's like a little kid where reciprocity is hard, just getting some back and forth going, then we are going to do things like peekaboo or Jenga, or build things and knock them over or roll things back and forth. Anyway, after the reciprocity, social problem solving. Now is when you get to where you can play role-playing games and have rules and turn-taking and all that stuff. Symbolic thinking is where, obviously there's things represent. You have a character. It's not just, playing a color and moving in Candyland. It's these things have meaning beyond that. And then logical thinking, how do you connect that? So when I'm working with kids, I just want to see wherever they are at the beginning. I want to try and move up that developmental ladder. Although I heard somebody describe it one time, instead of as a developmental ladder, they said, think about it like you're making a wedding cake, and you want that bottom layer to be really big and solid so you can stack more and more stuff higher on it. And so I've started switching to using that cake metaphor because cake, basically. So
I mean, as far as what we've seen, like what kind of results and outcomes we've had, I mean, most of the common things is you see increased social interaction, less isolation, taking chances, trying new things. We had one young man who actually, we joke in Bodhana that we take summers off and we let, the clients run the sessions. It's no joke. It's actually part of the therapeutic process. This young man said, well, can I be a GM? Well, sure, anybody can. I didn't know how at first. And when he first started, it was a clinical train wreck he tried, he did great, but from a player gaming perspective, he was telling his story. It literally was, we were shining a light on him and he was performing. He was telling his tale. And the other players, like literally the one other kid from group kind of sat there and he's like, when the hell do I get to play? And I'm like, what are you looking at me? I'm not the GM. Tell your GM what's going wrong in your session, And he looks at me and he goes, I can tell him that. I was like, we build in feedback. Like every week I ask how you think I'm doing. So why wouldn't we do the same for him? And at first it was tough for him to accept that feedback because he thought he was doing great. He was telling his story and he was doing it. But then the players were like, yeah, I'm not really doing anything. You didn't ask me any questions. You didn't weigh in for any of my decisions. We just sat there and listened to you talk to us. So we took that feedback. 9 months later, he came back, said, hey, can I try that again? And we said, sure. Do you want help on planning your adventure? He goes, no, I think I got this. And again, he didn't go from like, that example to like Toastmasters International or anything. I mean, we're not talking, but his level of reflective listening, his level of attention to others, and this is a person who's very functional, high on the autism spectrum. He was theory of mind when he was running initially. But he, in that experience, was able to go, well, if I want to run this game and have fun, then other people need to have fun. And if I'm not letting them have fun, then I'm not running a good game. And so in that time, we've then parlayed that into him, like learning better, as self-advocacy, learning for him to better verbally express himself. So now we're transitioning that with his mom into him going on job interviews. So we're trying to talk about that. Remember when we talked during that session about how you listen to your players and you really wonder what their questions are about and you really try to think through it. If you're in a job interview, it's not really that different. You guys are playing and to win, you want that job. So we even built into one of the sessions where, you go to the king for your mission and all of a sudden, hey, who the hell are these guys? Oh, well, that's the rival adventuring group from in town and they want the same gig you do. So now you're literally applying for the quest in the context of the adventure. And afterwards, we kind of did on the outro, I go, you were kind of practicing skills for interviewing there. How'd that feel for you? And he goes, that was weird, but it was fun. I think I got this. Do you want to practice next week? Okay, but I think I got this. It's up to you, bro. And he went on more interviews. Mom's like, he's more willing to put himself out there. And a lot of that was courtesy of the game. So, I mean, there's tremendous amount of rehearsal and demonstration. And I mean, the game can go as far as the person will let it take them is really a good way to look at it. Because you got to kind of have to, dive into the pool to some degree to get a lot of the benefit. That's what we've seen.
Well, to add to that too, like for us, we don't always see what it is outside of the session. It's the parents that sometimes tell us, and sometimes to us, it's a shock. Like we don't know how it's affecting the kids that we work with outside of the session. But when you have parents that say, hey, like my son is starting to go up to kids in church and talk to them and start to try to communicate with them and join in play while they're there. And for us, it's a great feeling to see that and hear that like starting to happen. We don't always get to see all the benefits that are truly happening outside of our sessions. We see what we see in our confined time.
Oh, go ahead, Shawn. I'll go after you.
Well, yeah, I'll just add something, Brian. You'll probably take us all home here. So I'll just say that what I'm seeing is like Jack sort of talks about when we talk about results. There's kind of like you can have a holistic impression of growth and improvement, or you can get more structurally the way Mike was looking at things, and you could come up with rubrics and milestones that you want to see if you're looking at it pedagogically or therapeutically. But I find that just like Tim was just saying, that we get the feedback afterwards, especially I certainly have from parents that they just sort of are singing with the praise of how they see their child improving across the board, to the point where I had, just like Jack was saying, I had one of my kids out of the blue, a very kind of introverted fella suddenly want to run a session, and he struggled. It wasn't the best, and I struggled to keep the kids from sort of complaining too hard on him. But I was really proud of him and how he decided to pick the game and then try and do it all himself. So that whole process of coming into your own and finding your own voice, these are the kinds of things I find myself saying when I wonder if the kids are benefiting or if anyone is benefiting.